What makes Newfoundlanders laugh? What makes Newfoundlanders laugh? We laugh every time we get the chance. We are of that nature. Somebody sees something funny and makes a funny remark about what they see, and then we're off. It could be about a person, it could be about someone's home, it could be about an animal, and it could be about yourself. And when the joke is on you, be sure you laugh the loudest. Then the embarrassment dies away. And this is true, you know. I was talking to a friend of mine, and this is the sort of thing that people in Newfoundland are like. They come out with the most unusual things. I was talking to Grace Sparks last week, and Grace comes from the southwest coast. She said a friend of hers one time went to Halifax. She says, "This is true, Uncle Al," she said. And when he got over there, he's visiting his daughter, he got very ill. And he died. And the mortician got a hold of him, made a great job, made him look great, you know. Brought him back, they shipped him down the southwest coast, and they opened him up for the wake. Well, the people were going around saying how well he looked, what a great power, what a great corpse he was. And a friend of the family came in, and he had to go in and see this wonderful thing. He came in and looked down at the corpse. "My," he said, "trip to Halifax didn't good." And to explain a little further, it could be an ordinary conversation turned into something very funny and innocent. And you see, I said funny. I meet people and they say, "Oh, you're the fellow that tells the jokes." I said, "No, I'm the fellow that tells the funny stories about ourselves, about Newfoundlanders." I was over in Port aux Basques. The Lions Club invited me to go over and talk to the senior citizens, you see. And they were telling me funny things that happened. It's only last Saturday. They were in a bar, and there was 6 or 7 of the Lions sitting around, and 2 of them got into a fun and big arguments, you see. And eventually they got to ugliness. And one accused the other and said about his family, he said, "You know, your sister was so ugly when she was young," he said, "they had to tie a couple of lamb chops around her neck to get the dogs to chase her." And then the other fellow turned down him. "Look here, me son," he said. "You was so ugly when you was born, they had to go next door and borrow a baby to get you christened." We are funny people, and we enjoy laughing at ourselves. That includes me. We laugh at ourselves. There's no doubt about it. And there was a line in an obituary in a Newfoundland paper, and it said this: "2 sons living, 1 in Toronto." What I tell is the average humor, or I better put it another way, the humor of the average Newfoundlander. You see, there's all kinds of stories written about famous Newfoundlanders, what they've done, great artists, medicine, great mariners, and all that sort of thing. But I've taken up the job of putting it down for history, the humor of the average Newfoundlander. You know the Newfie jokes. I can't leave that out because I'm having great fun with good ones. Silly ones, I just don't bother to repeat them, you know. 2 Newfoundlanders decided to go in business together, and they bought a truck. They went to Prince Edward Island, they bought Taties for $3.50 a barrel, came home and sold them for $3.50 a barrel, see? And one said to the other, "Boy," he said, "better give this up. Not making any money at this?" "No," he said, "I told you should have bought a bigger truck." talking to Lou Marks, who's my new brother-in-law, I said, on the phone, Christmas time, he said, you know, I was down in Port Basque the other day, and there was a fellow there in the barber shop, and he came over on the ferry yesterday, and he told us about a chap that was on the ferry who said, Santa Claus has to be a Newfoundlander. And nobody took him up on it. Eventually somebody said, why? Because he comes down from the chimney and there's 2 doors in the house. Another fellow finished the house, you see. Beautiful house. And he went off down to the bear parlor for a couple of hours, socializing with the fellows, you see. Somebody came in and told him his house was on fire. He made no move to go. Somebody came back and said, did we come in just down and told you your house is on fire? Ah, boy, don't worry about that, he said. There's plenty of lumber in the attic to build another one. Now, I was going to Grand Falls just about a year ago to entertain there. And just outside Gander, I picked up 2 fellows on the side of the road. Well, I was delighted I picked them up because after there, and I got thawed out, it was a cold night, I said, gosh, you're Al Clouston. I said, yeah. Well, we've got a good story for you, they said. Our sister lives in an apartment house in Toronto, and she's always writing home telling us what's happening. And there's a chap that lives in an apartment right across the corridor, and he came over there last month. He said, did you hear about the Newfoundlander who went out to the pond and cut himself a slab of ice because he thought that was ice fishing? She said, you come back here, you come back here. She said, what do you want? Do you hear about the Torontonian? No, what about him? He bought that slab of ice, took it home and tried to fry it. Newfoundlander was on the highway in Ontario, and he, nobody stopped to pick him up. After an hour or so, a fellow stopped, backed up the car, and he said, look, I'd like to pick you up. He said, what are you going to do with that cow you got with you? See, don't worry about that cowboy, champion runner, brought her up from Newfoundland. Well, he said, I'd like to give you a lift, get aboard. So he got in, driver there, driving, looking in the rearview mirror, 20 miles an hour, 30 miles an hour, and old cow coming lickety split, you see. And Newfoundlander, don't worry about that cowboy. She keep up with the car. Yes, boy, he says, right by the bumper. 40, 50, 60 miles an hour, and the driver made a start, you see. Newfoundlander, what's wrong now, boy? She got her tongue out. He said, which side, left or right? He said, to the left. He said, move in, me son, she wants to pass. This is all in the same vein, Luffy jokes, you see, for this section. The CN and Ottawa got fed up with the Newfoundlanders, squawking about losing the bullets, you see, and putting on those rotten buses. So they decided to come and give us a new railway, and they came and tore out the railway, gave us a new wide gauge, all new cars, and down came 6 or 7 of the executives from Montreal, from the CN, you see. And they got aboard, and gee, what a great railway. Going along, and said, this little shut the noose up, and about 100 miles out, the old train took a lurch, and she went from side to side, and she bucked and did everything, you see. And just as suddenly as it started, it stopped. Smooth again. Conductor was going through and said, conductor, what happened back there? Why, nothing to worry about that, skipper. He said, what do you mean, nothing to worry about that? He said, we all thought we were going to be killed. Ah, boy, he said, we only hit a mainlander. He said, what's the difference of hitting a mainlander and a Newfoundlander? Ah, yes, skipper, boy, he said, but this one was 20 yards from the tracks, but we got him anyway. going to skip one, but I'm going to tell you. Because this fellow should have been a Newfoundlander, I'll tell you. On the cross-country checkup, every year they have the Great Canadian Joke of the year. And this was 1975, see. And the next night, Sunday night, they phoned this chap in Newcastle and said, "You're the winner of the contest last week." They said, they got him on the phone in Newcastle, you see, and they said, "Would you please tell us the story again?" He said, "Sure." He said, a Toronto engineer was down in Newcastle, and he was depreciating everything about Newcastle, the people and everything else. And he got on to Toronto. "Oh," he said, "up in Toronto, why, we have the tallest building," he said, "in the world, the CN Tower, largest hotel in the British Empire, tubes under the railway, under the sidewalks, taking the trains." And just then one of the fellows interrupted, "Look at here," he says, "the one thing you haven't got up in Toronto." He said, "What's that?" He said, "Salt water." "No," he said, we don't. "But you're going to have it soon." He said, "How is that?" He said, "They're building a tube," he said, "from the Bay of Fundy to Toronto. And if they get you, and you can suck as good as you can blow," he said, "you'll have lots of salt." These two kids met one another. "Well, is you going to the wedding tonight?" "Who's getting married?" He said, "Our Sue's getting married tonight, boy," he said. He said, the marriage is up in chapel, and time was down in our kitchen. He said, "and the fire's up in top of the garden." Here's a Highland Coast story. This fellow went down Carbonear. He wanted a pair of short long overs, you see. He went in the store and a girl come over and said, "Can I help you, sir?" "Yes, me mate," he said. "You can." "How much that pair there?" $6.50, sir. How much that pair there?" $7. He said, "What do we get for the 50 cents?" "Oh, so you get a guarantee for that." "Well," he said, "I'll have that pair." And he says, I'll use the boots," he said, "for fishing daytime, and the guarantee for scuffing around the kitchen at night." The youngster came to Sunday school, and he was late. And the class teacher said, "I want you to tell me," he said, "why you were late." "Well," he said, "I was going fishing, but my father wouldn't let me." She said, "Your father was absolutely correct. He shouldn't let you go fishing on Sunday." "Did he tell you why?" "Yes." "Well, why?" He said, "There wasn't enough bait for the two of us." Bob McLeod is a great friend of mine. I think I told you he would play the Hargan for 25 years, and I was the Sunday school superintendent for 25 years. And Bob is a wonderful soul and entertained for many years, 40 years or more, and he's now retired, and I still go to see him. And this is a story that Bob McLeod told me. But before Confederation, about 1945, down in the Newfoundland Hotel was the old VONF radio, you see. And he said these two fellows from Carbonear told the story, and one corroborated that this was true. This old lady was on the platform, and the conductor was standing by. She said, "Now," she said, "leave me know when you get to Briggs Junction, won't you?" "Oh, yes, sure, he'd do that." But he forgot her, you see, and got about 5 miles beyond Briggs Junction, stopped the train, backed her up. And for the sake of any mainlanders here, that's what we did when we owned that railway. It operated for us, you see. But anyway, he went back and found the lady. "Now, ma'am," he said, "sorry to delay you this morning, but you're back to Briggs Junction now. Again, you can get out." "Oh, so she didn't want to get out." He said, no, down Carbonear this morning to see doctor. He gave me some pills, and he told me to take one din, and when I get to Briggs Junction, take another one." when Gerald Doyle used to travel around this island, you see, he used to have Bob McLeod with him all the time. Bob told me this story where Gerald anchored his vessel and went ashore. And here at 7 o'clock in the morning, beautiful morning in the summer, our friend was right sat on the rock there, and Doyle goes up to him and he said, "Well, Uncle Bill," he said, "I haven't seen you for a long time. No, Mr. Doyle, neither have I seen you." He said, "I haven't been here for some years. If you wasn't here, how could you see I if you weren't here?" That's right, said Doyle. But he said, "You know, what's the most unusual thing that's happened since I was here last?" "Well," he said, "can't rightly mind it now, sir, but you knows my brother Tom, doesn't you?" "Oh, yes," Doyle said, "I know your brother Tom." "Well, he's got a sow up there." He said, "And that sow," he says, "last week had 13 young ones." And Doyle says, "A great family to have all at one time, isn't it?" "Yes, sir. But that's not the uncommonest thing," he said. "That sow only had 12 teats to serve them 13 young." Doyle said, my, he said, "I wonder what that 13th little pig did." "I'll allow, sir, he sat around on his hen," he said, "waiting for somebody to offer him a drink, just like I'm doing now." Two old deaf fellows met, two fellows met, and one was quite deaf, you see. And one said to the other, he said, "I sees your brother, died. Deep, I can't hear you. I sees your brother died, eh?" He said, "Yeah, your brother's dead." "Oh, yeah, that's why they buried him." And then we had stories on religion, some buttes too. These two thieves, you see, they were always up to it. And when they bought something, they'd have to share up. They'd go down to the cemetery, you see, to share up what they had. So this night was just about dusk. They stole a box of apples. So they went down to the Anglican cemetery, you see, and went in there. Now, Jake was going by a few minutes later, and he heard this voice saying, "You take that one, I'll take this one. You take that one, I'll take this one." Jake says, "God, that's St. Peter and the devil in there now." Dividing up the souls, you see. Well, he went off, he got the bishop and told the bishop about it. The bishop come down and listened to him. And just before they went in the cemetery, you see, 2 apples fell out of the box onto the sidewalk. And one fellow went there, "I just leave them there," he said. "Why? We got lots in this box," you see. You know, the bishop came down and he listened to him. "You take that one, I'll take this one. You take that one, I'll take this one." And then he said, "They're all gone." With that, Jake and the bishop took off because the other fellow said, "What about the 2 outside?" Now, this is a harmony story. One of my salesmen came down one morning and he said, "Mr. Clouston, I had to come up and tell you this." He said, "Last night up in the barracks, I saw Solly Brewer. He got sold 10 years ago," he said. "And since he was sold," he said, "he always sat in that one spot in the back of the barracks. Never moved out of it. Always, every meeting he was on the spot, sir, I guarantee it." But he said that, and he was a comical old fellow, and they got used to him. Whenever the major would say something and he could think of something funny to add, right in the middle of a sermon, Solly would come out with it, you see. And last night he said they had testifying service. Eventually this gentleman was up there and Solly was in the back, you see, and he said, went on, and eventually he said, the Lord, he said, He've done a lot for we. He've filled me cup so full now he's overflowed. What'll I do with it?" And Sally said, "Pour in your saucer." I see that. I see the captain, he just did like that to me. And what I tell you, I told that in Canonwood Hall one night, and the two Salvation Army officers who were service club members came up, Mr. Clouston, he said, you might like to know, that's a true story. Reverend Lane Lunto, he's in charge of that Anglican church in there, St. Augustine's, you see, and he told me that when he had the parish down at St. Anthony, he said they used to have to go this north and south, you see, of his parish, taking care of the different settlements. And he said he used to use the sermon when he'd go out there that he had the Sunday before, you see. And when he would go out to these places, it would be 10 o'clock in the morning, he got a sick call, and he had to go a long distance. They'd usually have church. He was there then, and that's the time to have it. It could be 3 o'clock in the afternoon or any time. But his boatman was with him this time. He was a long trip, and he had used as his text the Sunday before, and Peter's wife, mother, was sick of a fever. Now, his boatmen had been hearing the sermon 7 or 8 times, sitting in the back of the church, you see. And when they got back in St. Anthony Harbour, the flag was half-mast, you see. And he says, hello, Jack. Reverend said, who's dead now? He says, I allow it. He says, Peter's wife's mother, she's been sick for a fortnight. A salesman come up to me one morning. He said, Mr. Clouston, down to Placentia yesterday. See my aunt. Quite aged, invalided, but bright in mind. She said, Victor, did Floss have the baby yet? Yes, Aunt. And how heavy was it? 2.5 pounds, Aunt. Oh, Victor, hardly worth half, was it? I was in Toronto. Oh, it must be 10 years ago now. And Mr. Robbins, the manager of the Lennox Furnace Company, came along and he said, I'd like to come out to dinner tonight. I said, fine. He brought along 4 or 5 of his staff. We went to a very swank club. Well, the place could hold probably 200, you know. We went in and sat down, and I said to the girl, get all the other orders first, please. And she said, yes, sir. So she came back to me, will you have anything? No, sir. No, I said, and I slammed the menu to, bring me some fish and brews. She said, fish and brews, what's that? Oh, I said, I've had it here 4 or 5 times, first time I was ever there. Well, she argued a bit. Eventually, Mr. Robbins said, Mary, for me, will you go over and go into the kitchen and ask the cook if he has any fish and brews? She said, for you I will, sir, but not for him, you see. So in she went, and in about a minute, the door to the kitchen opened, and this big tall fella came out, you know, with his white suit on, tall white cap, you see, and she pointed to our table, and he came over and looked us all over, and he says, who wants fish and brews here, boys? I said, I do. He said, where's you along, man? I said, St. John's. He said, I'm Trinity Bay, boys. I got an Arbid biscuit and soap now. We come back tomorrow and have for this. Well, I was delighted, you know, to find this fellow, a Newfoundlander. He was the chief cook there. This is an honest to God's fact. But imagine the one I should ask for fish and brews in that particular restaurant. Captain Rogers was from Fair Islands. And he used to come in and pick up different things, stoves and freight for different people, you see. And he used to always had a yarn when he came in. Now, he operated like all you fellows here know, a coaster, you see. But when we went into Confederation, the Department of Transport decided that all these fellas had to have a ticket. And I said to Captain Rogers one day, I said, look, Captain Rogers, when we went into Confederation, is it true that you fellas had to get a ticket? Yes, sir, he said. We had to go up to Buckmaster's Field, he said, and have an examination. But he said, this wouldn't be fair as I see it. You fellas didn't have any formal education in navigation. You learnt your navigation from your fathers, your brothers, and uncles. That's right, sir. Well, how could they expect you to write a test? Well, sir, they give we fellas a horrible test, sir. Well, would you tell me about one question? Well, sir, the examiner says to Hoy, he said, Captain Rogers, if you was going out with an arrows, and there's a fella coming in, he said, what side you kept up? Larboard, sir. That's right, he said. But supposing you was coming in, the other fella was going out, what side you kept up? Larboard, sir. That's right, he said. But supposing you was going out, and the other fella was coming in, and you went to come about and she mistake, things got in a confusion. What would you do then? Oh, hello, sir, he said, I'd have to be there. And you's along with me. Then I tell you. I went in to see Ray Baird in Corner Brook last year, and he's an old kinsman and a friend of mine. While I was there, another chap came in, and Ray said to him, how's Jim getting on up to the boarding house? Oh, gosh, I was just talking to him the other day. I said, Jim, what's the grub up to the boarding house like now? He said, grub? He said, the rats are going around with tears in their eyes. During the construction days of the Fort Pepperell, they had this fellow there, a great worker. Oh, boys, he was do two men's work at any time, see. And this day he had wallboard to put up. And they couldn't understand why the wallboard was going up. In 2 days he just went through it like nothing, you see. And the super was going by the building one day and he heard the hammer going. And he went in. Look here, he said, now I understand it. He said, why did we give you that screwdriver there? He said, you don't hammer screws in, you take the screwdriver and screw them in. He said, now that's the last of it. Don't you use that hammer anymore. During the afternoon, he went by, and see, the hammer was going again, you see. Went in, and he went over to him, he was annoyed. Look here, he said, did you ever see the slot in the top of a screw? Yes, sir. Do you know what that's there for? Yes, sir. Well, what's it there for? For taking a note. Another story which I got from my old friend Bob McLeod was they were holding court. And a very important point was, they had this witness aboard, was the distance from the wharf to the schoolhouse. And he says, now listen, Tom, he said, if it takes 10 minutes to go from the schoolhouse to the wharf, he said, like anything, you go from one place back to the other, it must be 10 minutes back. Not always true, sir. Gracious, he said, it's a half a mile from the schoolhouse to the wharf. And he said, from the wharf back to the school, it must be a half a mile again, he says. From one place to there, back to the next place, he said, it takes the same length of time. No, sir, I don't agree with that. Well, he said, in that exasperation, the magistrate, well, said, can you give me an example? Yes, sir. He says, the 7 days, he says, from Christmas to New Year. But it's 365 days, he's back from New Year's back to Christmas. I was telling you earlier this evening that people are realistic in Newfoundland about living and about dying. I was talking to the Oddfellows this evening, about 2 years ago, and an old fellow came up to me and he says, "Mr. Clouston, I lived in the houseboats one time too." There's a woman there was wonderful sick. She's Martley Hill, I said. And the doctor gave us 6 months. And time was most up, and she looked up off the bed and she says, "Harry, I knows you isn't too old to get married again. I'd be at the same thing if I was you's age," she said. "But there's one thing I got to ask you." "What's that, mate?" "That your new woman won't wear my clothes." "My Flossie, no worry about that, mate. No concern at all," I said. "Your clothes twice too big for Bessie." On another occasion, it was in 1974, I was going to Grand Falls on Friday afternoon, and right by the overpass near Chester Dawes, you see, 2 fellows were standing there, and I pick up all these fellows. There were two students going to Greenspan. They were aboard the car for about an hour, and they saw the record. "Oh," he said, "you're Al Clouston." I said, "Yes, we've got a great story for you." Down on the wharf in Greenspan, just before the elections, he said, there were 6 fellows there, and there were 70 and more. And they were yarning about the elections. One of them was at, now, spending all that money with elections now, he says. "What them liberals do for we fellows in 22 years anyway," he said. "Just so well give PC's a chance at it anyway. Don't leave them by there. Don't mind spending all the money now," he said. And they weren't very kind to Frank Moores, and our friend Roberts was only one of Smallwood's babies, you see. And then they mentioned panting. One fellow, "Who's that fellow panting? Anybody know he?" "No, he's a new fellow around, but knows nothing about he at all." Then somebody said, "Joey Smallwood." "Joey Smallwood, that cocky feller," he says. "Everything goes at he wants to be the it of it. Most important feller there." The other says, "Yes, I knows that's true, 'cause I allow," he says, "every time Joey goes to a funeral, he wants to be the cops." Not easy, is it? In the old days of the Newfie Bullets, you see, there was a female up top, and male down below. And she put her head out, she said, "Would you mind getting out and getting me a blanket? I'm wonderful cold." "Is you married?" "No, I'm not married." "How'd you like to make out you was married?" "Oh," she said, "that'd be fun. I'd like that." "Well, get out and get your own blasted blanket." Gentlemen, I just got to say, you're just terrific, and I knew if I came out again, I'd get the same reaction that I got through you. I'd say the night was better. It's just been grand, and all I can say is thank you. It's been marvelous.